The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you.
Jesus said to his disciples, "A rich man had a steward who was reported to him for squandering his property. He summoned him and said, 'What is this I hear about you? Prepare a full account of your stewardship, because you can no longer be my steward.' The steward said to himself, 'What shall I do now that my master is taking the position of steward away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do, that when I am removed from the stewardship, they may welcome me into their homes.' He called in his master's debtors, one by one. To the first he said, 'How much do you owe my master?' He replied, 100 measures of olive oil.' He said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Sit down and quickly write one for 50. Then to another, the steward said, 'And you, how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 cores of wheat.' The steward said to him, 'Here is your promissory note. Write one for 80. And the master commended that dishonest steward for acting prudently. For the children of this world are more prudent in dealing with their own generation than are the children of the light. I tell you, make friends for yourselves with dishonest wealth, so that when it fails, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones. And the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. If, therefore, you are not trustworthy with dishonest wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? If you are not trustworthy with what belongs to another, who will give you what is yours? No servant can serve two masters. He will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
It is time to make a decision. Decision-making time in today's gospel. Today's gospel that Deacon Darrell just read from Luke is an important part of Luke's gospel. In the previous chapters of his gospel, we've seen Jesus performing miracles, walking on water, healing people. This is the part of Luke's gospel where people are calling it the teaching part of the gospel. He's telling parables and giving out teachings that are very important if you want to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Is what we just heard was a parable that Jesus was addressing to his disciples. It wasn't to the whole crowds and masses of people. It was to his disciples, to those men who were going to be the future teachers. So we see the teacher training the new teachers. And this gospel in particular has to be looked at in two separate parts because it was delivered in two separate parts. And you'll see the distinction hopefully very clearly. The very first part of this gospel, we hear Jesus telling the disciples a parable, which of course you just heard and you've known about the the wealthy man who went away. And when he came back, he found that his steward had been squandering or cheating or stealing, basically. And we're not sure how this man who went away and who was wealthy, we're not sure how he got his money. A lot of people who were wealthy back then got their money because they were tax collectors. And they would overcharge for taxes and then put some of their money in their pocket and give the rest to the government. And they became very wealthy people. So we're not sure how this man got his wealth, but we know he leaves his land and property in charge of this steward. Now this steward has charge of everything. He has charge of all of his finances, his land, collecting the rent, collecting his portion of the crops that were due to the master. This steward has charge of everything. Well, now the master has heard that this steward has been squandering or stealing from him. So he comes home and he confronts him. And the steward doesn't deny it. And so he's fired. But now after he's fired from stealing, being a thief, he says, what am I going to do? I'm not going to go to work. I've got a better lifestyle than that. And I'm not going to go beg, because that's embarrassing. He comes up with the idea that you just heard about going to someone and saying, listen, what do you owe my master? 100? Well, make it 50. Well, now he's also lying because they think he's still working for the master, which he's not. And he's stealing again. He's giving away stuff that is not his to give away. So in this parable, we're seeing a bunch of rascals and scoundrels who are not afraid of lying and stealing and cheating. And that's where the parable ended. It left the apostles kind of scratching their heads, saying, what's the point? Are we supposed to be lying and cheating and stealing? Because, see, we heard the whole gospel in its entirety, but that's not how it was taught. Jesus taught them about the steward who was cheating, and when the master found out about it, he commended him, saying that was pretty creative. Not a bad idea. He was actually rewarded and commended for lying and stealing, and then Jesus ends the parable there. And Scripture scholars tell us that it was probably a day or perhaps a week later before Jesus gathers them back together again and said, you know that parable I told you about the steward and the liars and the thieves? Let me finish the story for you now. Give you the meaning of it. So you don't think I'm trying to say it's okay to lie and cheat and steal. He says that was the old law. That's how people treated each other before the coming of the Son of Man. Things are different now. Things are supposed to be different now. You're going to be serving a different master, a master of truth, a master of integrity, a master who's truly honest and doesn't lie and doesn't steal. So you've got to make a decision. Do you want to follow the old way or the new way? And you can't serve two masters. You've got to make up your mind. You've got to make a decision who you want to serve and how you want to serve God, with the old way or with this new way. And you can't be wishy-washy. Yes means yes and no means no. If you say yes, it's got to be 100%. You can't serve two masters. And we might be able to say, well, yeah, I definitely want to follow the new way because I want to inherit the kingdom of heaven. I want to follow the way that Jesus is teaching. And I'm doing a pretty good job of it. I see some things in my life that I'm changing. I'm becoming a better person. I'm leaving the old behind and adopting the new. You know, it's kind of like I'm really learning how to be a better person who can forgive and let go of things and not hold grudges. Except my brother-in-law, Frank. I will never forget what he did. So maybe we're not there yet. And you know, I used to be a person who liked to gossip a little, you know, just a little. But I don't gossip anymore. I just sort of hear things and repeat them. And sometimes they're true. Or, you know, I'm really more of a person of prayer now. I'm going to church every Sunday. Monday through Friday doesn't count. I don't need God Monday through Friday, just on Sunday. So this gospel that we just heard is two separate parables. One where Jesus is showing us what the old law was like, and people accepted that and lived by that. And the new law which says, no, this is not the way to live. This is not the way to treat your neighbor. You have to serve this new master, and you have to serve him 100%. So you've got a decision to make. Do you want to live with the old ways before the coming of Christ? Or do you want to hear about my teachings and the new way of life that you have to live if you want to inherit the kingdom of heaven? And you can't serve two masters. You got to make up your mind. And it's going to make a difference in the way you live with your neighbor. So today's gospel is a gospel that calls for us to make a decision. But perhaps more importantly, today's gospel calls for us to live a decision.